41. All right, so I think I believe we are recording as usual. So just a reminder there, we've got the mics on. Good to see you all. Happy to have you all here for our April meeting. Let's get started. My name is Nate. Good to see you all again. Aaron here from our team as well. And we've got the MPS facilities team in the back. I know we've got some folks still trickling in, so feel free to grab a seat. Glad to have you all. Just before we get started, wanted to give our guests for this month's meetings in the room a chance to introduce themselves. So,
Sure. Brian Albert, I work in the transportation office, so I'm here for Dave, who's at the Council of Great City Schools right now in Charlotte. Brian Albert, I supervise the transportation office, the day-to-day operations. I'm here for Dave today because he's at the Council of Great City Schools in Charlotte.
in context for those of you, Dave was at the meetings last week from the transportation team. So yeah, glad to have you around. And then Dr.
John Hill, Director of College Paradis, with the Office of Academics. I'll pass it to Bill.
Hello, Rocío Trejo, the Director of the Department of Bilingual Multicultural Education.
All right, great. Well, yeah, so we're really happy to have you all here to support the conversation. Oh, come on in. Yeah, nope, I think these are both open. Around transportation and programs, and like we did last meeting, we're going to try to move as quickly. Oh, I think we're going to click as quickly as we can through the presentation portion, so that we can really maximize the breakout time and the time to be working together. Perfect, thank you, Larry. So just a quick run through the agenda. Looks very similar. We'll just knock out the administrative items at the top, quickly run through the landscape analysis. Hopefully folks had a chance to review the slides or watch the recording. Just give you a little bit of a breakdown there. Then we'll look at some new sort of regional versus district data as it relates to transportation and programs specifically, before we move into small group work, just breaking out and doing those sessions. So we do have the room next door again as well. So happy to use both those spaces. And then if there's time with the community insights questions and look ahead, happy to do that. But we also want to be thoughtful and sort of mindful of maximizing time to work together. So just a quick look ahead on that. The next month's meeting will be focused on facilities specifically. And then the month after that, which is not in the slides, but did just want to note, our intent is to, after now having these sort of three big content focused meetings, that was, enrollment, budget, staffing, transportation and programs, and then facilities. Having that June meeting be really focused on sort of almost case studies, what's happening around the US and like how are other districts sort of dealing with similar challenges, to try to put into perspective some strategies that are in place or have been sort of recently sort of implemented and what sort of results are being seen from those strategies. So really trying to start to put pen to paper with all the content and knowledge that we've done here as we sort of transition into how can we look at what are some good solutions for or strategies for the district in Milwaukee. All right, I'm gonna quickly jump through. So you have new handouts that are there. Those are all on the Google Drive as well. Just mentioning at the top, I know there's been a couple of requests trickling in for access. If you ever are having trouble with access, and if it's slow or you're not getting access quickly, please don't hesitate to call or text with an email or send an email. We want to make sure that you can access the materials. It's really important. So hopefully that's not been a barrier for folks. And from there, I will pass to Lauren to speak to some of the.
We only got a few different comments back from the community insight forum on the enrollment, staffing and budget. But a couple of the highlighted elements was that inequity in information for all school districts and looking for people to have more access to that information. And then also kind of a little bit off topic from the enrollment and staffing, but a focus on the effects of consolidation rather than just consolidation as a main topic was brought up. And then also equity in extracurriculars and other programming outside of just inside the classroom.
Thank you. So I know we want to keep things moving here. So again, hopefully folks had a chance to run through this. I'll move quickly through the slides. If you have questions or need clarification on anything, please do let us know. We want to make sure that that is understandable, but really just sort of starting out with transportation, looking at costs on a national level. So what you're seeing here is just kind of these shades of greens and blues showing the average cost per rider at a statewide level. So Wisconsin showing there at about $560 per rider, and that is, I believe these are, 17, 18 numbers. So it is worth noting that the national average is around $1,150. So those really do range when you consider rural districts versus more urban districts. You see like DC, I think, is at the higher end here. Context there. DC only provides transportation for special education students. So those costs per rider are much higher because those students cost more to transport.
So I believe that busing costs have dramatically increased since 2018. I don't know if anyone in the room can speak more directly to that, right? But so like doubled, right? I mean, it's a lot more than what you're showing there.
I would say costs have definitely gone up, but Ryan, yeah, if you want to.
Sure, I can add. We've been able to mitigate some of the overall costs by adjusting to the 3-tier system. Your fixed costs are going to be how much you pay drivers, which driver pay has dramatically increased, but the transportation budget for this district has been relatively static for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and no, it's a great question. There's more content in there just about how some of the, sort of unique approaches might help to reduce costs, even if the fixed costs are remaining the same. So digging in a little bit, looking at transportation costs for MPS specifically. So this is just showing that of the proposed budget, and I know this number is a little bit different. So we have this noted, I believe David noted in a previous meeting, but that number is around 65 million, which is just over 4% of the overall MPS budget that is goes towards transportation. And that about, there's about 37,000 MPS students. And then when you factor in private school students as well, that number goes up to around 50,000 students who are using school funded or public funded transportation as well. So moving through, looking at just some of the history to that point about bus driver shortages, some of the challenges that were there. So obviously the pandemic created an immediate halt on the need for transportation, and then trying to come back from that after was very challenging. So this actually does show just some of the wage challenges that exist with school bus drivers. So you'll see that the weekly wage change over a 4-year period from 19 to 23 was declining while the average was going up significantly in relation to that. And then at the bottom here, Hop Skip Drive is like a rideshare company. Brian, you can probably explain better what Hop Skip Drive is, but
they're one of the 8 alternative vehicle companies that we use. So they're primarily used for high cost isolate situations. So McKinney-Vento, special ed, IEP students on the other side of town. We use them, but they do a lot of reports with nationwide driver shortages.
can you give 15 seconds on McKinney-Vento and what that is?
Yeah, McKinney-Vento is a federally mandated, often unfunded program, which essentially states that if a student qualifies for that program, it's like homeless, right? But it's defined as displaced students. the district has to facilitate transportation for them, even if they move out of town. So for Milwaukee, that looks dramatically different than neighboring school districts. So we have a lot of McKinney-Vento students coming from not only just within Milwaukee outside of transportation regions, but also all over Wisconsin. So Racine, Waukesha, Port Washington, really anywhere in between.
Yeah, thank you so
And
much.
just to add to that, some of that also is because, you know, they want, just like if a student is in a group home or something, they want them to be able to stay at their home school because they're already displaced, they're not, so at least they have the balance of being within their own schools.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good point. I think David had mentioned in one of the earlier meetings that I think 10% of the transportation budget with MPS goes towards students experiencing homelessness, while that is not representative of all the students in place. So similar to special education, it just comes at an outsized cost to provide transportation, which I think I forgot to mention in the last slide, that average cost for MPS per student or per rider is around $1,100 as well. So closer to that national average, yeah.
And is that just, besides that programming, is that just the buses, or is that like the bus passes and bus?
I believe it's any,
Or it's not even physical passes, anymore, but you know.
It
what I
depends
mean.
on the circumstance. So if it fits on an existing bus route, a lot of times we have special ed door-to-door routes existing outside of schools' transportation region. So we'll process it, and we do all of our own internal routing. We'll process it on existing routes when available. Sometimes we will have to use companies like Hop Skip Drive if it's gonna cause a timing issue going to the route after, or it's just out in Waukesha, there's no way we're gonna be able to get a bus to and from. But they're also used to mitigate costs. You know, we don't want to add a full bus for one McKinney-Vento family at a
I
great
guess-
distance, but we can also use bus passes. We also do use bus passes for high school grade students
Right,
based on what the route looks like. If the route looks like an hour and 45 minutes using Ride MCTS's app, we're not going to use that. You know, that's just not reasonable. So we try to take a reasonable approach at it while mitigating costs, if at all possible.
does these costs and percentages include, not just for like, students who have IEPs or anything, does it include just the
Generally.
regular like high school bus pass?
like you're talking about, if they're riding the county bus or something?
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe it's
Okay.
all folded into sort of district funded transportation.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Hop Skip Drive also does a lot of they do a large survey every year, so that's linked on that last page. You should be able to find it from there, but a lot of statistics and details around how transportation is impacting districts generally. So then zooming into the school bus driver shortage and how it impacted Milwaukee. So Milwaukee was no different during the, sort of COVID challenges that were created there in terms of reliability, bus driver shortages, all the sort of ripple effects that come with that. It is worth noting, just to make sure that it's easy to assume that that must still be going on because it is happening at the national level, but the shortage has actually significantly declined. I don't know that it would be accurate to say there is a bus driver shortage currently with MPS at least, which is great. But yeah, Ryan, keep me honest here.
Yeah, there is not bus driver shortages. We feel comfortable and confident with where each of our bus vendors are.
Great, but I believe statewide it is still, impacting a lot of districts around the state. So it really does depend where you are. So, and I believe this is set up, so any of these articles that you see now, you should be able to click on any of them from the PDF and it'll take you to that article just for ease of access. Next, just zooming out nationally again. So just some trends that are being seen, since the COVID-19 pandemic and just really the declining use of school bus as a mode of transportation at public schools. So again, this is nationally speaking, but you're seeing that the use of private vehicles has gone up, and depending on age, travel by foot or bike may be increasing as well. Public transit is still relatively low, but it's just, this is creating new challenges for a lot of schools where you might have long backup lines for pickup and drop off, idling vehicles. They're just maybe weren't designed for a large number of cars to come through. So certainly new situations that are sort of coming out of that. And then just digging a little further, and I think this is an important point to make on transportation, is just the differences based on, who is using private transportation more versus school bus. So on the left, you're seeing families where a parent has a bachelor's degree or higher. On the right is families that have no parent with a 4-year degree, where school bus use is actually ticking up on the right over here. And on the left, it is going down significantly while private vehicle is going up. So just thinking about how equity ties into transportation as well, and keeping that in mind as we, sort of consider different options here. So looking nationally, again, like what's changing, what else is being tried. There are some districts like Colorado D11, so Colorado Springs, that's using an AI tool that I believe is through Hopskip Drive actually to help them with optimizing routes and looking at different tiers and saving them a lot of money by sort of helping them cope with a bus driver shortage. So doing more with less. And then you have CPS on this side, they're using I believe it was parent started, but this piggyback network, which is basically carpooling service. So sort of an app that allows parents to more easily carpool within Chicago. And, given that they also have a lot of choice schools and students traveling far, it's an interesting consideration. So then with MPS specifically, a couple of newer developments, the shifting start time that recently went back 10 minutes with that 3-tiered system, just given that there were, and again, Ryan, keep me honest, but I believe students showing up late to school, and that just the impact that transportation can have on chronic absenteeism and everything else like that. So that was passed. And then the last piece is a bus tracking app just to sort of help parents deal with some of the reliability issues. During COVID, there have, sort of horror stories of parents not knowing where their kids were for multiple hours and things like that. So I think we've come quite a ways since then, but, starting to use more and more tools and technology to help families sort of have a better understanding of what's going on. Keep moving. So yes, transitioning a bit from transportation into programs. So just a brief history lesson of why these two are sort of tightly knit. When schools were desegregated, finally, so after Brown Board and when court orders came in the 70s, choice schools and magnet schools, which are kind of interchangeable terms, or at least magnet schools and specialty schools, excuse me, were really a very common strategy that districts use to help desegregate their student population. And then busing was sort of the catalyst for that and helping students get around to different schools. So that's when the transportation program really grew a lot, and MPS, similar to those districts, obviously rolled out a lot of those specialty and magnet programs, mostly at the high school level at that time, and started to really lean into the busing piece with the hope of, pushing towards integration and desegregation. Hopefully y'all are aware, nationally speaking, it's the same story, I think, or a very similar story to what you're seeing in Milwaukee, where segregation is still a really, serious challenge that is very present, even with the implementation of the specialty school program. It's just helpful to have that understanding as we dig through all this. So digging into a few of the big ones for MPS, Montessori, I think, is one that MPS is most known for, or at least highly known for, given that there are more public Montessori schools in this district than any other one in the US. But you're seeing here, these are public Montessori specifically. So just this gradual growth over the last several decades, you're seeing, this sort of stops at 2014, but that number has continued to sort of inch up. But it is worth noting that I believe, it's only 10% of Montessori schools in the US are actually public. So the majority of them are private schools, but certainly a growing interest with those programs. Then you have dual language programs, which have really exploded recently. So if you look at that top bullet there, you'll see that there was over a 250% increase over, I think, an 11-year span from 2010. So really growing quickly, and then the vast majority of those are Spanish speaking. And just with the increase in English language learners, we talked about that at the last month's meeting, you can kind of expect some of those programs to continue to grow in that way. Also, please keep me honest. And then the IB program, so another growing pretty widespread growth across the US. So seeing, I believe it's 45 of the 50 states experience growth with IB programs. over that decade period from 2012 to 2022. And just the expansion that is being seen within MPS as well in recent years. So that is another one that is on the rise. CTE programs are definitely growing, you know, especially with this sentiment of college not being the only path forward. So you know, you're seeing increases in state funding, a really high percentage of high school students who are participating in CTE classes. This actually just shows CTE concentrators, which is different than like a participant, but it's somebody who's really in that field of focus. So how Metro Milwaukee in the blue compares to the state of Wisconsin. So you're seeing a higher interest in business and IT, and then lower interest in like family and consumer sciences, health science, agriculture. But just an interesting display of the data. And last but not least, just speaking to how this kind of has an impact on sort of your neighborhood schools or attendance area schools, but nationally speaking, so this again goes through from 99 to 2016, but just seeing even within public school districts, the amount of students who are attending their sort of assigned schools or neighborhood school is dropping while chosen schools is on the rise. So yeah, that is everything for the landscape analysis. Any questions before we move in? I know we're moving quickly, but just want to make sure we save time to break out. Okay, great. So some of this you are hopefully familiar with, but again, just as we briefly touched on last time, you know, relatively low numbers of students in MPS who are attending their neighborhood school. Almost 90% of high school students are not attending those neighborhood schools. So digging in a little bit further, this is another one that is on our website, but we think that is important to point out is just kind of where students are coming from and going. So the way to read this is just kind of these darker colors in the diagonal line show where students in what school board district. So we know these are different from the regions, and we'll get to that in a second, but what you're seeing here is like these regions 2, 3, and 4, the majority or a large number of their students who live in that area are not attending school in that region, whereas in 6, 7, and 8, so 6, 7, and 8 are down here, 3, 4, and 5, 2, 3, and 4 are up here. But 6, 7, and 8, more than half of the students who live there are also going to school in those regions. So just seeing a lot more travel that is north to south and a lot less that is south to north. So looking at it for the central region specifically, we've kind of mapped out a similar detail. So showing on the vertical axis here, the region of residence. So these are students who live in each region versus students who sort of attend schools in that. So that what this is saying is that in the central region, there are 42% of the students who live in central region who are also attending school in the central region. That is actually the lowest number of any region. So of all the regions, this is, you know, the region where the most students are actually going to other regions to attend schools. And obviously this is focusing on specifically MPS students going to MPS schools. This does not take into consideration private school students or independent charter students. Yeah.
Do we have access to that?
Yes, all this will be shared right after.
I know that the other one was, so.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I think we've been putting them on the Google Drive right after. So we should have that to y'all tomorrow. But yeah, and then you can just to kind of read the chart. So of students who live in the central region, 25% are going to the east region, 17% to northwest, around 17%. These numbers, I think, are adding up to like 101 just for rounding. So just to point that out. Yeah.
Do you have something similar to this to the walk zone one that you were like to name their assigned school? So like, do we know are more people in the southwest region going to their assigned school, or are they just going to a school in the southwest region?
That's a good question. We don't have that in this presentation.
Okay.
But we'll make.
That's a curiosity. Yeah, I was wondering if that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you flagging that. Yeah.
So when looking at those percentages, is there a breakdown by elementary, middle, high? Because I'm thinking, especially with the central, elementary kids, they can only go so far transportation wise. So if the numbers are higher, the percentage going to northwest and southwest, I'm guessing it's probably mostly high school and some middle school.
Yeah, I think there are definitely higher numbers. You know, I think these are great notes in terms of how we can further sort of disaggregate this data and split it up, try to show in different ways and really dig into it. But yeah, we don't have that in this presentation tonight, but if we will make note of it and try to get it added in. Yeah, and all of this, the intent is to, you know, sort of get it built into that data dashboard to allow everybody to sort of filter through it and really dig in.
So I don't know if it's the next meeting or not, but do you have information on, families that are coming into Cycle from outside Vermont? Because I have somebody coming from Oak Creek and I have somebody coming from West Milwaukee to drive their kids to school.
Like open enrollment students
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have that broken out separately here. That's another one that I think, yeah, it'll be helpful to dig into those percentages as well. Yeah, and those are important considerations, right? Like students who are open enrolling and coming from outside the district, are also filling seats in.
But specifically to Central, because I think that's information that, you know, people don't realize that there are parents who choose
Right.
that school, so, you know, for something.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point.
And that goes back to my question too, kind of the opposite of what you said. So when I'm looking at this where it says 40% of Central Region are actually live in Central Region. Do the other colleagues, is that saying that we have students in Central Region that are coming from other regions, but it's a small amount?
Yes, so
That's
these are the
14.
percentage of students
So
who are,
14% are from East Region are
Correct.
coming into, so even though we may be losing 17% to another region, we're still, well, actually, it's kind of weird when you look at the 17 and 17 from Northwest. Okay.
yeah, so the vertical, these are the students who are going to the Central Region. So living in the Southwest, attending a Central Region school.
Right. Yeah.
And yes, we'll make sure we get this all shared out, so, yeah, just to keep moving, so the average travel distance, this just shows, you know, as students get older, they tend to travel farther to go to school. Very normal for what you see for, going up to middle school and then high school, having that larger jump. We break that down sort of at a regional sense, you can see, that actually, for the Central Region, which is the darker line in blue there, they are traveling farther at a younger age than the district-wide average. At the middle school age, below the district-wide average, and then, for the most part, above the district-wide average for high school ages. So broadly, tend to be traveling a little bit farther to go to school on average. And then, for this one, so, this is your average travel distance for students to get to school. So this is students who are attending school in the Central Region specifically, regardless of where in the district they live. But you see that 48% of the students so just under half of the students who are going to school in the Central Region, are traveling between 2 and 6 miles. And so this is relatively similar to what we're seeing with the other districts, and it's worth noting, so we are putting all the presentations in each different folder. If you want to pop into another region's folder to see what this data looks like for them, and obviously, until we don't have it built into the data dashboard just yet, but you should be able to access any of those through the Google Drive. So, touching again on grade level configurations, just the wide array that exists within the district. So knowing that there are a great deal of those, we wanted to break that down by a region level as well. So, you know, depending on the number of schools that we're talking about, this can, you know, be more or less interesting, but you'll see that just to look at it, sort of slice it that way, the blue line again is Central Region, you're seeing that on average, fewer K-8s than the district-wide average, but more K-5s, pre-K-5s. So, and then the others kind of hover around. There's the, you know, pre-K to 6 program that's here. And so, you know, given that there are a greater variety of school types, that can be a little trickier to look at. So shifting to specialty programming, again, noting that, you know, around 65% of all MPS schools have specialty programs that fall into these categories, I believe, of 13. We know that there are additional programs that are out there. We just wanted to hone in on sort of these main programs for the sake of this. So this is another really interesting table that's just showing basically sort of percentage of the schools within each region that are offering these specialty programs. So that is to say, of all the AP programs, 17% of them are in the central region. And then sort of moving your way down, so you can see, for example, with the bilingual programs, 86% are in the Southwest region. And they're, bilingual and language immersion. I don't know, Dr. Rosso, if you want to give like 10 seconds on just kind of the difference between those. I know they can be harder to.
Sure. The bilingual programs are designed to serve primarily English learners who have a Spanish-speaking background. And so we have one-way and two-way programs. One-way are gonna serve mostly English learners, whereas those two-way should have a balance or aim to have a balance of English learners as well as native English speakers. And then immersion programs really serve native English speakers looking to acquire a target language. And so we have those in French, German, Spanish, and Italian.
Awesome, thank you so much. Great, so yeah, and then just pointing out, so you'll note that central region is a bit lower on CTE pathways, so central and east, and then with Project Lead the Way as well, which is, I believe, like a science and technology focused program. So I don't know if you keep me honest there.
Yeah, it's a STEM curriculum.
Right.
And there's a elementary component, a middle school component, and a high school component.
Okay.
So, and any school can choose to offer it, provided they're able to fund it.
Okay. Yeah, so this is another one that I think, the longer you look at it, it's a little more interesting to dig in to see how those programs are sort of divvied up, especially when we're talking about potentially how we want to think through if a programmatic investment is, a strategy that might be, pragmatic at the end of this effort. Yeah.
Makes you wonder also about the gifted and talented, is that, funding also, or,
So gifted and
Yeah, I'm glad you
talented,
brought that one up.
I
Yeah.
can speak to that. So I know we have two schools that have gifted and talented in their titles, however, we are moving to more of a service model as opposed to a program model, because there are gifted and talented students in all our schools. So we approach it more like response to intervention or multi-level system of support, with the expectation that if a school has gifted students, they are providing those additional supports to those students. So the schools that have that already had it. However, this is the direction we're going. We have parents who have students that are identified as gifted, who want them to continue in a language immersion program, continue in a Montessori program, continue in their neighborhood school program, or whatever school they're in, because they're happy with it. So we have been moving in that direction.
can I push a little bit further, what about AP?
AP is the same thing. Advanced placement, any high school can offer it. Typically, IB schools will not, because they're doing international baccalaureate. So pretty much every high school except a few whose enrollment is so low, basically, they're not able to free up a teacher to offer that course. But we have AP in about 18 schools, I want to say.
Does MPS still offer telepresence for AP classes?
We still are offering that this year, yes.
All right, so we are nearing the end here. So one last slide just to, before we get to sort of the breakout questions, but this is a little bit harder to understand, but basically what you're saying here is, so just kind of to that point, we have broken out those specialty programs as like these whole school programs versus programmatic offerings. So whole school being like a language immersion program or IB, whereas a programmatic offering would be like AP, where it's, sort of exists within the larger school, just to see. So this is in, a little preview of what we'll be talking about more at the next meeting, but the vertical axis is utilization, and the horizontal axis, the x-axis there is average travel distance. So what you're seeing is like IB schools, for example, students are traveling farther, over 4 miles on average to go there, and the schools are relatively well utilized, so meaning they, have more students, sort of higher student to capacity ratio. Whereas like you look at community schools or arts focused schools, arts focused where students might be traveling farther, but those schools have lower utilization rates on average. And then the size of the circle is just how many schools within the district that's representing, for context. So, yes, easier to dig into once there's a little more time. But yeah, with that, we wanted to sort of shift into breakout questions. So, just a quick rundown again. I think we've adjusted these timing a little bit. We want to give more time for the actual breakout and just save a few minutes at the end to sort of report out and share with the larger group in terms of what was covered. Just a reminder in terms of like, accepting non-closure and everything from the, equity of voice and from the norms and expectations that we created. But yeah, and then we can jump through the questions. So you should have these. We sent them out ahead of time in an effort to try to give people more time to think about that. We're trying to give you as much in advance as possible to really try to maximize our time here with one another. I think the only thing that is different from what is printed out in the printout one that was handed out today is just that we put in like the example for question 2 about city resources. So like the county bus system or partnerships for safe passage, where that might be something with, safe routes to school, walking, things like that. So that's kind of where that question was headed in terms of city resources. If it's helpful, if folks haven't had a chance to read them, we can read through them now, or we can just sort of divide up and have a chance to break out. Again, we don't need to go in order. You do not need to answer every question. We know that the first question can kind of spill into enrollment conversations again. So just calling out some of the pieces that we've gathered in the last few meetings, but any clarification questions or anything else before we sort of get moving on that? Awesome. If I can ask, so we have the other room next door too, just trying to see if the best way to split this up. So maybe, how many of us are there tonight who are participants? Maybe if we can have this table in the back go to this room over here, and then we'll have you guys merge with one of these 2 tables. That sounds good, and we can have those staying in. All right, and then we'll have the folks who are sort of our guests from MPS and the specific teams, if y'all can float around and just kind of provide context to each small group, that would be really helpful, just to make sure that they've got the right information to talk about them. Thanks, y'all. Oh, please grab snacks if you want. We upped our snack game. There's chocolate.
Sure did.
Yeah, they were really
There's
good.
salty stuff.
They were really
We took the
good.
feedback. All right, great.
Good job on opening the snack game.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good job.
Got a lot of shade from friends and family.
Oh.
it might work for some schools, but, you know, French immersion is entirely reliant on citywide. They're a one up, right?
Right.
They're the only school that does that thing, so that's why it's the citywide. Which makes it more difficult, so the timing issues and the students are traveling.
So less choice?
I am never gonna say
You cannot say
that.
those words.
Never gonna say that.
Programming reorganized. I was gonna say, like, I don't think take the choices away, I think they don't maybe just live in one building.
Right.
You know, how can you
Right.
be innovative, like, in other ways, especially if we have, you know, if we do virtually, like, you can still be in the classroom and have a virtual French class
Right.
or whatever, or maybe you're in this pod or like school within a school. I just think that there's ways, but I also feel like we're losing potential candidates who want to come over to the district and then be ours.
We don't offer any bilingual.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
Which is beyond transportation.
I agree with that. There has been I mean.
There's no bilingual, there's no.
Okay, just in the last few minutes, I do want to make sure we give folks a chance to share out with the larger group. If somebody, maybe one or two people from your group want to give 30-second or however long download of just kind of the highlights, 30 to 120 seconds, let's say. Keep a broad range, but yeah, would love to hear what y'all talked about. Do we want to start with this table up here?
Sure.
All right.
That's a lot of questions.
We have a lot of questions on our transportation front. We talked a lot about using MCTS and the fact that it used to be utilized a lot more often and you don't see it as much anymore. And kind of talked about the fact that it's not because we don't get a very big discount on it and they have fixed routes. And the difference for us is that we talked about there were 20,000 route adjustments per year and 10,000 of them are just in September to start the year. And that the routes are not static. They have to be they vary constantly. And that's just kind of a constant challenge that we have with transportation. But we also talked about the fact that if you want to have any kind of extracurriculars, any kind of after-school programs, and you're not in high school, that transportation does not accommodate that. So if you want to be on the soccer team after school, you don't get to take the bus home. And so that's a challenge as well, and one that I don't know that we can really accommodate, unfortunately. And then we also mentioned before and after school care, that most schools don't have it because it doesn't really work with the busing system. And that is something that probably is affecting enrollment and parent choices when they're looking at schools.
Keeping
Anyone
kids
else?
together,
Oh, yes,
Keeping
thank you.
kids, siblings
yeah,
together.
siblings together. Discuss special needs, programs, McKinney-Vento. We did draw the conclusion that transportation is not the driving force in school selection, necessarily. More the ability to choose where you're going more than anything. And that the minority of the issue, if we were to try and help us, transportation, things like McKinney-Vento, even special needs, while it is a large portion of busing, it's not large enough to say that that's the driving force impacting our enrollment.
Got it. Thank you all. All right, much appreciated. Table in the back that so graciously moved rooms and came back. Thank you. Anybody want to give a quick download?
We talked about looking at everything and some tough decisions need to be made as we look at the schools within the central region. It's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all. Focused on, we talked about the elements of good neighborhood school. The base being having at least minimum 2 classrooms of everything, full-time art, music, gym, phy-ed, psych, social worker, and after-school program. Because that element, when you start at the bottom, moving up the food chain, if the kids have not had an art experience or anything with gym, when they get to middle school, loss of interest. Then when they get to high school, definitely no interest, and their goals are WAIAA programs and funding, for schools. And the decision, which lies ahead, or what the configurations of school is going to look like. It's a big job. And some real solid, courageous, decisions need to be made to help benefit our students, because we are not, having babies at the rate and the reality, there's no children hiding elsewhere.
Right.
Throughout the district, because even the kids that go to, the choice or charter, they always come back.
They do, they do.
They're knocking at our door after the first check is dropped October 1st. And then it continues with the up and down. And then we also have that mobility rate issue as well.
I think one thing that we differ on from the first group that spoke was that transportation is a very key driving force. I worked in the Department of Student Services, which does enrollments, and so people come in, and if they don't have a specific school, the first thing, we ask them, do you have a school in mind? I said, no, but I need a school with a bus. And there could be a school that's right next door, because, it was spoken before we broke up, people want a babysitter, they don't want to get up and walk the kid to half a block to the school down the street. But they'll put them on a bus where they might have to walk, a block to get to the bus stop. Some of it is, driven by safety. Parents don't feel safe with their kids walking in certain neighborhoods, whether it's in the morning, especially in the winter when it's dark so early in the morning for those early start schools.
Sure.
So, yeah, it is a driving factor.
Appreciate the contrasting point there. Yeah, thank you guys. And then last but not least, anybody?
Well, I didn't take notes, I'm sorry. I was-
Say, what did you hear?
So we started out talking about the transportation driving factor. And one of the things was that, people make decisions based on their needs. It could be economic, it could be their work schedule. We talked about the attractive features that, draw people to those schools, the bilingual, the STEM programs, and then what can the district do to attract, retain, within the region, those students. So for example, middle school feeding into the high school and the programs, there's continuity. We were talking about surveying the parents, and we have the 5 essentials at the University of Chicago. We survey the teachers, the staff, and students, but the University of Chicago created a survey for parents, and yet we don't survey the parents to find out the why. Why are, how do you feel with your school? And as I mentioned, I've been to every single school in this district twice, and the thing that stood out to me with that experience is, how do I feel when I walk in this building? And sometimes it's, you feel warm, you feel, cozy, you feel welcoming in all areas. Like, I don't want to give the impression that it's all just one region rather, but in many of the different schools within all our regions, there are schools where you feel that warm feeling, right? And as a parent, I will fight for that school. I will find my own way if I have to get my child to go to that school. So that a 5 essential survey is very important to uncover the why. And the other part to it is the exit survey. I feel like we need to do a better job of finding out, why did you leave our school? What went wrong, or what can we do better? Not only just from our school, but the district. Why are you going over there? What do they have? And harvesting that information so that we can make better decisions. Because currently, we do not have a practice of asking parents the why. and you know what's going on.
That's
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover. So, no, this is really great and, hope that you all had some interesting insights and takeaways. So like we mentioned, we'll get this shared out. So the community insights piece will be in that take home survey. We'll send that out, tomorrow morning. And then just again, the look ahead for next month, we'll be talking about facilities, and really digging into all that information. If you haven't had a chance to look at the places page already, please, do so. And then in addition to that, just reiterating that our intent as of now for the June meeting is to really focus on kind of what we're seeing elsewhere, right? Like what are other districts, even as we look across statewide or nationally, districts that might be facing, you know, similar challenges or have similar opportunities, like how are those districts sort of, approaching those situations? So we're kind of wanting to shift into that piece, which I know we've been sort of talking around, is like, now that we've got this shared knowledge-based understanding of what's going on in the district and sort of how the key pieces of how it works, how do we start to translate that into intentional strategies and figure out what might work best? So really just want to thank you all again for your time. Happy to hang around for a couple minutes afterwards to answer any questions or anything. But yeah, have a wonderful evening and feel free to grab a snack on the way out.
All right.